Politics got you down? Is your team in last place? Is your significant other sleeping with your neighbor? Well, cheer up. The Julio Rivera Show is on. Deal with your problems afterwards.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, hit it!
We are controlling transmission.
Ladies and gentlemen,
The Julio Rivera Show is on.
Good evening on this Thursday, June 6th, 2016. I'm sorry, June 9th. Look at me, looking at the calendar incorrectly. My name is Julio Rivera, and this is the Julio Rivera Show. What a crazy week in politics since the last time I talked to you. As I've predicted, and I was talking about it actually for the last couple of weeks, if you guys saw me on Newsmax last Friday, I actually brought it up when I was on the panel. Now we're hearing grumblings of a delegate revolt. My buddy Steve Lonigan was actually on television earlier this week, I believe on MSNBC, bringing up the same exact thing that I had brought up, that I had talked about earlier, you know, the Curly Hoagland stuff and what the Convention Rules Committee is actually going to bring to the table as we head towards the event in Cleveland, which I can't wait for. As you guys know, I will be in LA for Politicon shortly, hoping to grab a lot of great interviews there. We had Sabo on a couple of weeks ago, kind of giving us a preview of what he's going to be doing artistically. And listen, tonight we have got a huge program. Really just huge. We've got Justin Moldo of libertyhangout.org. He's a young libertarian voice. He's got a lot to say, really a bright guy, and we can't wait to talk to him. From Congressional District 1 in Nevada, running in that primary, which I believe is on the 14th or the 15th of this month. If you're in Nevada, you should know, not necessarily me, but he will be on, and he will be getting the same treatment that every candidate that comes on our show gets. I will be asking him specific issues-based questions, and we can dissect his answers from there. And my first guest, who I'm so excited to have, actually we were lucky to reschedule him because we originally had him for last week, but somebody that I'm a huge fan of. Actually, my initial, I guess, being, made familiar with you, Niger, and good evening, Niger Innes. How are you today?
Great to be on with you.
Fantastic. I was laughing because I was talking to a friend of mine, because when I grew up, I always wanted to be either have a radio show or be on television or something like that. And one of the people that I used to always admire was Morton Downey Jr., who had kind of a really wild political, kind of controversial show back in the late 80s and early 90s. And one of the more memorable moments that I always remembered was the moment when it was, your father, Roy Innes, with Al Sharpton.
Sure.
Yeah, that was really a heated moment at the Apollo
Theater.
when they broadcasted live from the Apollo Theater.
That's exactly right. I was there way back when. I think I was in high school at the time. I think it was 1989 that took place, actually no, I think it was 1986. But whatever the case was, it was quite a ruckus. What you may not have seen, and of course anybody that is concerned that would like to see this incident can just Google video Al Sharpton and Roy Innes, and you will be you will enjoy what you see. It's quite a treat.
That's funny, and you know what? Your dad is the bomb, because you know what's funny too. Lightning would strike again on television as far as your dad being in the middle of a ruckus, because if everybody recalls, the very famous incident with the Nazi skinheads on the Geraldo Rivera show, in which everybody remembers Geraldo Rivera getting his nose broken by a flying chair. But I remember what I take away from that is your dad not taking any crap from those white supremacists, and again on television starting another ruckus. It was great.
Well, everybody knows about Geraldo getting his nose broken from the chair. But what people don't know is the reason. The reason is after my dad started to straighten out the tie of one of these skinhead types.
Is that what they're calling it now? Straightening out? He was just adjusting his tie.
He was just adjusting his tie. And a ruckus broke out, and these guys from the audience, actually, these skinhead cowards from the audience started throwing chairs, and Geraldo was actually defending my father and taking his side. And when that happened, somebody threw a chair at Geraldo, and it broke his nose. So in a sense, Geraldo stuck his nose in the middle of a chair that was destined for my dad. Wow. He was a great guy and a great friend of the family for my father for decades and myself for many years.
Well, you know what? Getting now towards some issues-based stuff. I was just looking at the Tea Party Forward website, and one of the things, the main thing that jumps out at you when you first log in, as far as what's showing on there now, Black Lives Matter has been labeled as a terrorist organization. And listen, I've experienced this type of this false social justice movement. I grew up, obviously in northern New Jersey, and I've been in New York a lot, and I see they're really it's thuggery. A lot of it, supposedly is funded by elements in the left. But what exactly happened? They attempted to bomb a police station. Is that exactly what happened?
Well, forgive me if this is something that's happened in the last 24 hours or so. I've missed that, so I'm not familiar with them trying to blow up a police station. I mean, that would be pretty intense. No, I look, the objections that we have had to the BLM crowd is a couple of things. Number one, the BLM, Black Lives Matter moniker or label is really artificial, okay? These guys are not about black lives. They're not promoting black lives. Anytime someone brings up, okay, if legitimately you are fighting for black lives and trying to say Black Lives Matter, then certainly the fraction, an infinitesimally small fraction of blacks that are killed due to not just say white cops, let's say any cops, is tiny in comparison to the carnage that's taking place in urban centers all across this country, where unfortunately and tragically blacks are shooting other blacks. Victim and as part of a criminal warfare that's taking place in many of these cities like Chicago. And of course you've got places like Chicago and Detroit and others where the murder rate, which was already bad a couple of years ago, is now skyrocketing. And in those circumstances, one, you create this friction between the police and the communities that they're supposed to serve. What you get out of that is chaos. There's only one winner under those circumstances, and that winner of the criminal class. And there's two losers in that circumstance when the police and the communities they serve are at odds with one another. The police are losers, of course, and then the ultimate losers are the people, decent rank and file, black, Latino, lower income whites, that are become prisoners in their own communities because you have a situation where crime is out of control.
Yeah, exactly. And the police are afraid to do anything on it because, God forbid, if they should have to use their actual service revolver, the court of public opinion is automatically going to turn against the police. The police at this point now are guilty until proven innocent, unfortunately. And I like the fact that you used the word coward earlier in describing BLM, because it's truly the cowardice that they show in being afraid to address the true issue. The true issue is the black on black crime that unfortunately is prevalent in these urban centers like Chicago, obviously being. And it's funny too that our current president, who happens to be black, is from Chicago, and he himself cannot even truly address the issue.
That's exactly right. I mean, I wish that, instead of talking about, Trayvon Martin, if he had a son, he'd look like Trayvon, and focusing the attention of the world on that particular case. I'm not saying that I would have much preferred that at some point during the 7 years of his presidency, he had made a real effort to expose the horrors of black on black crime and the fact that all these other incidents, these incidents that take place where there is a misunderstanding or a law enforcement official behaves badly, that those cases are so rare in comparison and by comparison to the number of black folk that are losing their lives every day across this country in inner cities. I've said this before, that there is a self-imposed genocide taking place among young black men. And that is a crisis, and that's a crisis that I wish that this unique president had been more aggressive at addressing over the years.
Wow, yeah, and it's something, I know so many people that I grew up with in Patterson that, in jail, they follow that same pattern. They wind up in gangs. The only real outlet that they see is to try to become successful, either joining gangs or selling drugs. And it's really, until these legislators really try to address the real issue and stop hiding behind the phony issue, unfortunately, these liberal hubs, these major urban metropolises that have been ran by Democrats for, some of them upwards of 50, 60 years, they're never going to get out of that mentality and out of that state that they're currently in. I wanted to switch gears real quick, just over to the presidential race for a second, and just get kind of your take on some of the comments that have been made recently. Who are you? First of all, are you a Trump supporter? Do you consider yourself a Trump
supporter? 110%. I was last week, and I still am this week. Although I'm perturbed by the Mexican kerfuffle, I still support Donald Trump 110%.
Okay, now let me get your take on, because it's something that's being spoken about, and it's the decibel level is raising, and I think it will raise as we head towards Cleveland. What do you think as far as the delegates being bound, not bound, being able to change their mind, whatnot?
Donald Trump is the nominee of our party, de facto, okay? The rules are the rules, okay? They're not going to change the rules in the dead of night. That would be suicidal for the Republican Party to do that. Donald Trump has enough bound delegates to be the party's nominee. I don't. So
you don't subscribe. You don't subscribe that the state, that the actual, because the convention does actually. They write their own rules. They present it to the delegates. The delegates vote, and every actual convention has its own unique set of rules, which actually trump the state rules. So that's actually, I think, the reason why a lot of it is coming out now.
Well, but you know something? I suppose technically they could do that. I find it highly unlikely and unusual because first of all, many of these bound delegations are made up of people that the Trump team, particularly one, and this is when my candidate actually at the time, Ted Cruz, was still in the race, when they realized that there was an effort being made to deal with the rules. They wanted to make sure, and I'm talking Team Trump, that's when they hired Paul Manafort to make sure that these delegations were not only symbolically bound to Donald Trump, but that they were politically bound to Donald Trump. So in other words, these are delegations that are largely representative of the vote that has taken place. And as we know, Donald Trump, love him or hate him, Donald Trump has gotten more Republican votes or more votes in a Republican primary, combining traditional Republicans as well as, some people call them popular, some people call them nationalists, some people call them American firsters, whatever you want to call them. These are folk that largely sat out the 2012 election and that we're going to need to whip Hillary Clinton. So even if these guys were to change the rules at the last minute, you can guarantee that all these new votes that Donald Trump has brought to the fore, they could very well sit on the sidelines and stay home. So I don't know how realistic it is. I don't know that anybody has stepped up and said they're willing to, if the rules get changed, they're willing to throw their hat in for a nomination. I don't think that's going to happen.
Very interesting, though. But one thing, and you're absolutely right. Listen, a lot of the people that Trump brought in under the tent now are people I believe that were out of the game for a little while. Maybe they sat out '08 and maybe they sat out 2012. So he does have a very loyal, almost ravenous following with him, who obviously would have a lot to say if something was to occur, and he may very well have over 1,237 delegates that are dedicated to him politically. So, it'd be interesting to see what happens. But one thing that I'm worried about is in the general election and the popular vote, he has, I think, somewhat of an issue with Hispanics now because of the comment from last week. Some people have perceived that he is somewhat misogynistic in some of the commentary that he's made. What do you think from a positive standpoint, Niger? Like, let's say if you're in that brainstorming session and they're trying to figure out, what can we do to raise the negatives that Trump may have with, minorities and with women? What do you think that, what would you suggest that he do to work towards that?
Well, first of all, keep in mind that, the Latino community, you throw out there just Latino, and people make presumptions about all Latinos must think alike, and they don't. First of all, you have Mexican Americans, you've got Central Americans, you've got Cubans, you've got Brazilians who I don't even know if they are considered Latinos, but they could very well be swept up. You got Puerto Ricans, of course, and and by the way, that's a huge and growing population, particularly in the most critical battleground state, which is Florida. You now have a situation where Cubans at one time were the singular definition of Latinos in Florida, but that's no longer the case. I think there are 1.3 million Cubans. They're close to 1 million, I think over 1 million Puerto Ricans. So which Latino are you talking about? In my state of Nevada, Donald Trump won the Latino vote in Nevada in the Republican primary. I don't want to make it as simplistic as this. You have two terms. You have Latino and then you have Hispanic. For those that consider themselves Hispanic or call themselves Hispanic, or for those who are maybe proud of their Spanish heritage but consider themselves full-fledged Americans, the numbers for Donald Trump are much more popular than among, I guess, ethnically identified Latinos.
Well, I mean, to speak to the point though, Niger, is that we saw the protest in San Jose, which was orchestrated in a state like California, which is
orchestrated exactly. Some of them were gang members throwing up gang symbols. Some of them were anarchist types burning American flags and waving Mexican flags. I don't know that that's truly a representative sample of Latinos in America, Latinos or Hispanics.
Okay, well, no, obviously, yeah, because I mean, that would actually be a very negative thing, unfortunately, if that were true.
Would be, yes.
But one thing that I do worry about, and I think that he kind of fuels it by making the statements that he made against Judge Curiel, is that the media is going to play that up. So I think that's where the danger lies.
I can see the commercials now. Yeah, I mean, look, there's no doubt that, unfortunately, the Donald did give ammunition to the other side. There's no question. I think he realizes that now. If he had just added the term first, because everybody, some folk are saying, oh, American first is racist, It's not racist, or American first is, chauvinist, It's not. It's just making very clear where your interests are, where your priorities lie. And if Donald Trump had, instead of calling Judge Curiel, who of course is an American, as American as you or I am, born in Indiana, so factually speaking, of course he's American and not Mexican. But philosophically speaking, or ideologically speaking, a person that has joined the La Raza lawyers group, and of course we know that La Raza stands for the race, meaning the Latino race or Hispanic race, which is an accurate term because we know that Hispanics and Latinos come in a variety of different colors. But in any case, they call it the race as kind of some special interest ethnic group. And if indeed Curiel is influenced by the politics of the La Raza lawyers group, then it's a very legitimate question to where he can serve as a fair judge. Because Donald Trump has been a bit bombastic on building the wall and, calling people Mexicans and those types of things. So just by changing one word and saying, is Curiel a Mexican firster, instead of saying he's a Mexican, that he's a Mexican firster, and then people can come back to him and say, well, what does that mean exactly? And he can say, well, look, ideologically speaking, there are groups, there's special interests, Latino organizations that believe that the Southwest was stolen from them by the United States and believe that there needs to be a reconquista. There needs to be a retaking of land that used to belong to Mexico. If you have that philosophy, if you have that as your ultimate agenda item, then obviously your interests are going to be quite different than those supporting Donald Trump.
Yeah, that probably does create a conflict of interest, so to speak. You know what's the one thing that when watching Donald Trump, because at the very beginning last year when he got into the race, I was intrigued by. I did like a lot of the things that he had to say, but one thing since in the last, it's been now over 12 months, or it's been about a year. Does he not have a PR guy? Does he not have somebody like pulling him to the side and telling him it's all good to be politically incorrect and tell it like it is, and all the perception that goes along with it kind of fuels the mania behind him that's driving him to have all this success. But I mean, certain things it's like almost like a common sense thing. Like you should know better than to say some of the things that he says. I mean, I'm sure as a supporter sometimes some of the things that obviously come out of his mouth must make you cringe.
Well, I have a what I call comprehensive assimilation class and students. Actually, I just left there here in Nevada, in North Las Vegas, Nevada, and I can tell you that supporting Donald Trump sometimes is a bit of a challenge. but nevertheless, look, let's understand this. Let's keep it in perspective. What those that have raised questions, I think Speaker Ryan has raised questions, and others have raised questions about Donald Trump. And I've said point blank that what he said to Curiel was factually not true, and while it was not racist, it was racially sloppy. Okay, on the part of Donald Trump, and what those of us are saying is that do not change. Okay, he has run a brilliant campaign. Brilliant, unprecedented, historic campaign to gain the Republican nomination. But now that he has gained the Republican nomination, it's time to make a little pivot. It's time to step up your game, time to fine-tune, not change. Not change. First of all, you can't change Donald Trump. He is who he is, and he's been that way for decades. And for the most part, it has worked brilliantly for him. So don't change. Just tweak. Just adjust. And because I think, quite frankly, the election is his to win. I think that that Hillary is quite vulnerable, okay, in spite of the fact that now there's this big love fest. Elizabeth Warren has endorsed her. Obama has endorsed her. Bernie has put away the fangs, okay. It's pretty much over. She's going to get a nice little bump in the polls, okay. She'll probably be 5 to 6 points to maybe 7 points ahead of Trump in the next few days or so. But that's how shall we say it? That's a souffle that is destined to go down inevitably. And Trump is in this race. It's a competitive race. Most of the American people, not most, but a good 20 to 25% of the electorate is undecided. They don't like Hillary. They have questions about Donald Trump. And it's his race to win, but he certainly cannot make any more Mexican mistakes, if you will.
Well, listen, she's a souffle waiting to go down. That's definitely the line of the night there, Niger.
All right, my friend. Great
That's
being
definitely
on with
hilarious.
you.
I love that one. We're gonna keep that one on file because I'm gonna refer back to that one from time to time. Listen, it was a pleasure having you on. Very insightful. I hope we can have you on again. Give our best to your family, and God bless you for all the good work that you do. That was Niger Innes, everyone. On the other side of the break, we've got Jeff Miller. Don't go anywhere.
Find the Lanterns Radio Network on Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, iTunes.
They can intercept this transmission at any time, so I'll be brief. The fight is here. The time is now. Go behind enemy lines.
Player FM, YouTube, and other social media by searching keyword Lanterns Buzz or Lanterns Radio Network.
You're listening to the number one source for political, pop culture, and sports talk on the radio. The Julio Rivera Show. Hashtag Conservarican. With no fuck left to give.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, hit it!
We are controlling transmission.
Ladies and gentlemen,
The Julio Rivera Show is on.
And we're back on the other side of the break. I have the fastest breaks in the business. The Julio Rivera Show on Lanterns Radio Network this Thursday, June 9th. You just heard Niger Innes and all his wisdom. Very insightful conversation we had with him. And we're going to switch gears now and talk down ticket race here. The Congressional District 1 in Nevada. We have a candidate by the name of Jeff Miller joining us this evening. How are you this evening, Mr. Miller?
Doing great, Julio. How are you, bud?
Fantastic. Why don't you give us a little background for those who are not in Nevada or who don't know much about the race going on? Give us a little background. Who are you running against in this primary, and why are you running?
All right. So right now the incumbent is Dina Titus. She's Harry Reid's puppet. She votes with Nancy Pelosi 96% of the time. And right now in the primary, which is going to be this Tuesday, June 14th, I'm in a six-way battle with an attorney and with a banker. And the two of those people, that's part of the problem now. We have too many attorneys in office. We have too many bankers in office. And so the reason I'm running, I'm just a regular guy. I've had enough, and I want to get back to the Constitution the way the framers intended it to be. And I want to give the people representation. I'm tired of these politicians. They get elected, and they forget the people. They go on to be elected monarchies almost, and that's what we have with our current incumbent. You know, she voted against the Botched Abortion Survivors Act, where the bill came across that if a baby survived the act of abortion, the hospital staff was to take the baby in, raise it, nurse it back to health, and she voted to have the child killed anyway. She voted in favor of the Iran nuclear deal, and she gave a speech to justify it. She says, "In my mind, I know this is wrong, but in my heart, I know it's the right thing to do. America has to lead by an example." And she went on to say, "There's no use in crying over spilled milk." So I asked her right there on Twitter, I said, "Dina Titus, who do you represent? Do you represent the people of Nevada, or do you represent Iran?" Blocked. Totally blocked me. So she just wants to play the role and do what her bosses tell her what to do, and she's forgot the people. And so I'm running to give it back to the people. I believe in what the Constitution says, and I still believe in the American dream. I'm a product of it, and I want to protect that for people my age, people even older than me, but more so for the children that are coming up later, because right now they don't even know who a strong conservative is, and that's why I'm leading so much in the polls with the younger generation, the younger crowd, because they haven't known a stronger conservative. They haven't had that leader yet.
Now, let me bring up a very important issue in this race has been immigration. Donald Trump obviously got a lot of attention with his initial proclamations regarding building a wall and deporting people, which he's kind of backtracked on since. But what is your idea for comprehensive immigration reform?
Well, first and foremost, we have to secure the border. And I have no problem putting a wall there. But when people think of a wall, they think of the worst case scenario. They think of the Berlin Wall, the Cold War, and just a terrible, terrible thing. Well, in my mind, I mean, shoot, what we could do, I mean, it depends how far you want to take this thing. You could turn it into a national monument. You could do all these certain different things. But before that, we got to secure the border. We got even put the military down there. And, I'm not anti-immigrant. Not by any means. I want immigrants to come here because that's what built America. And they had great inventions along the way. And so I don't want to be confused as being anti-immigrant. But we have to secure the border. And it's a public, health issue as well because we have diseases coming across with Zika, even Ebola, which we haven't heard anything about here recently. But, it's a human trafficking issue as well because people, and it's not just Mexico. And that's something that we have to get across as well. It's people coming in from Central America. Chinese are smuggling people across the southern border. And who knows who else is coming through there, even ISIS. So my plan is this. The people who have came here illegally, they broke the law. But the Republicans are so afraid of being called bigots and racist and everything else. But my take on this is we take a common sense approach to it. People that are caught coming across the border now, if they have no children with them, they have no ties here in America, we send them directly back. Now, people who have been here 30, 40, 50 years, we look at it on a case-by-case basis. We look at them and say, what have you done for your community? Have you been a pillar of the community? Have you done things for the schools? What have you done to make your society better? And the people that have not been in jail, people that have not been arrested, we don't give them amnesty, not by any means. We don't give them a free pass to say, okay, but what we will do is we will give them a fine and we'll work it out and give them a chance to become American citizens. That is if they have kids here and even grandchildren. So we're not ripping families apart.
Well, let me ask you a question. If they don't have kids, first of all, I'll let you know point blank, I don't necessarily agree with doing it that way when we have at the last report, it was almost 95 million working age Americans either unemployed or underemployed. But if let's say you're here, there's no familial connection directly. I'm not talking cousins or anything like that. But let's say you don't have a parent here or a child here or something like that. Now, would that person be also eligible for legalization under your plan?
We would have to look and see what they have done. Mm-hmm. But now I'll tell you this. Mm-hmm. I run a business. I'm not the owner, but I'm vice president of the company. Mm-hmm. It's hard to find people who want to work. So the unemployment rate, a lot of it is just people just don't want to work. And I'm willing to give people many opportunities. In fact, I had a guy yesterday. I had an interview with him, set it up. I even let him pick the time. When's a good time for you? No showed for the interview. And this happens constantly here in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. So, you just got to take a common sense approach to it.
Well, the one thing I will say is I think that the liberals in Congress have created kind of an environment where people feel entitled and they feel that they're too good to do certain jobs. And that's probably the reason why you get some of the situations like what you're talking about. But I honestly think that's baloney. I think that if you don't have a job and you want money, you need to work no matter what the job is, whether that's a menial labor job, whether it's some type of something dig your hands in and get dirty kind of job. I don't think anything is free, and unfortunately, people in our society now have reverted to that line of thinking where it's the government will take care of me. And I know what you're saying; it does make perfect sense. If you do have people that come here and are willing to work hard, that's great, but what we need to do, I think, is get back to Americans working hard, because we're only making it tougher in the job market. The other issue that's of big importance on this year, Obamacare obviously has been a huge job killer. People have kind of proposed ideas or modifications to it, whether that be private accounts, whether it be tort reform, whether it be eliminating the employer mandate. What is your idea for healthcare reform?
Well, here's my idea on it. First of all, Obamacare is the biggest socialist scam in American history. Nowhere in America should any American be forced to take something they don't want to take. Now, people who want health care, let's do something for those people. And we have in many ways with programs like Medicare and Medicaid. But that's not good enough because people are still, it's the healthcare system itself with the insurance companies and the doctors and the hospitals. And so we have to do more at that level. But for Obamacare itself, there's a lot of people who don't want insurance. And now they should not be forced to take it. Mm-hmm. And then if they don't take it, they're going to get a fine, a tax. John Roberts can call it whatever he wants. It's a tax. Why else would the IRS be in charge of enforcing it? It's wrong. So what I say is we repeal it all and replace it with the free will of the American market, the American citizens. Let them have a say on whether they want it or if they don't want it.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that tort reform is an important part of that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, there's so many different parts to it. It's not an easy question to answer, but there's many things that we have to review and just start over because this country has just went downhill. I mean, it's been going down here since I'd say probably the 60s, 64. So it's just got out of control, and so.
Well, that was really when the big, we started with, Medicare and Social Security back under FDR, but I think that the massive explosion in government entitlement in the 60s, like you're saying, back in the 60s is actually kind of where we lost our way in a major way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so we just got to get that back, and right now it's spiraled so much out of control. So anything that we can do to slow it down, to stop it, to fix it. Prime example, the homeless population here in Las Vegas. A lot of the constituents here came to me and said, let's do something about it. What can you do? Well, one plan that I have for that is to get homeless veterans off the streets. We're going to set up programs, let them know what benefits they are entitled to, starting with non-service related injuries. That way it creates an income for them. Now, for the other folks who have no military experience at all, that still opens up a can of worms because nothing has been done for so long. And there's no easy solutions. There's no easy fixes. But we have to start somewhere, and we have to start with people who are saying enough is enough. We have to be fiscally responsible. We have to run the government like we do our pocketbooks. If we have the money, we can spend it. But if we don't have it, we save it. And we've got to stop creating money out of nothing. The dollar is on the verge of collapse. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable. So you got to start somewhere. Right now, we can put the brakes on it, slow it down. But if we don't, next 10 years, if that, we're just going to go sliding right off that cliff.
Okay. I also want to, because it's a major issue, and I ask everybody that comes on, right now we're taxed enough already, which is like kind of what the whole Tea Party thing is about. What is your idea of a tax reform program that can stimulate the economy? What would you do regarding tax reform and entitlement reform in order to get the country back, or we're probably never going to get in our lifetime back into the black, but what do you, to at the very least stop the bleeding and get the deficit shrank and, create jobs? How would you do that through taxation and entitlement reform?
Well, one thing that we could do, one thing that actually comes to my mind right off the top of my head, right now we're spending, I think it's $3 trillion a year at the United Nations, giving them, and that's just for this year alone. Well, first of all, we cut that out. Mm-hmm. And first of all, I don't want that kind of money being spent, so I say just quit spending that. But if we're going to end up being forced to spend it on something, you spend it on the roads, you spend it on the power system here to upgrade it. But not only that, I mean, what we do is we put a tax holiday on corporate businesses overseas where they have to quit protecting their funds on offshore accounts, get that money home, and in return for that, they're going to start, open up more businesses here, give more Americans work, and even give them tax breaks, incentives to bring the jobs back home, put people back to work, And that's what we have to do. And so, I mean, that would be a huge step in the right direction, I think.
Okay, well, why don't you go ahead and give everyone your contact information if they're interested and you would like to help Mr. Miller win his primary. Where will they go ahead and get you, sir?
Sure, I appreciate it, Julio. They would go to millerfornevada.com, and primary date, the election date, June 14th. Early voting ends June 10th. So we just got to get your support. Once we win this primary, I'm the only guy who can beat Dina Titus. I have a clear path to victory on this, and we're going to win. So anybody who wants to go there, they can always volunteer, sign up to volunteer. We know all the volunteers that we can get. They can also donate to the campaign because someone is going around defacing my signs, putting graffiti on there, and actually taking knives to them and just ripping them all to shreds.
Really?
Because people,
wow.
When you start, yes, it's a hostile environment because once I start telling them the truth, some people just can't handle it.
Well, good luck to you, sir. Hopefully we can have you on in the future as the new congressman from Congressional District 1 in Nevada. God bless. And on the other side, we have Mr. Justin Moldo of LibertyHangout.org. Don't go anywhere.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, hit it!
We are controlling transmission.
Ladies and gentlemen,
The Julio Rivera Show is on.
And as I always say, the fastest breaks in the business. And we're back here on Thursday, June 9th, 2016, Mega Show edition. How are you, Justin?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on, Julio.
Haha, fantastic. Well, we just listened to Jeff Miller, who's running for Congressional District 1. Earlier in the show, we had Niger Innes, and we discussed some of the Black Lives Matter stuff and the presidential race. Now, you are a libertarian, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, and tell us a little bit about why you're a libertarian and what led you to make that decision and about you in general so we can get a better idea of who you are.
I'm a libertarian because I believe that every single individual owns themselves and owns their property, and I believe that no man has the moral right to tell someone else what to do with their person or their property. So because of this, I believe that taxation is theft, and we need to minimize the government as much as possible.
That's awesome. You know what? That makes perfect sense. Now, you're the founder of LibertyHangout.org. What exactly is that?
LibertyHangout.org, it's a libertarian website that James Chlemme and I started up about a year ago. And so when we first started, there was really no stated goal in mind. It was really just made to be a blog, just to get our opinions out there. And then last summer, it just really started to take off and blow up. And so what we've been doing for the most part is we push out a lot of libertarian articles. We like to make memes, videos. And as a matter of fact, the past few months, we really had a helping hand in trying to promote Austin Peterson for president of the United States. He was running under the Libertarian Party, and he was the main challenger to Gary Johnson. And Austin, he really went a long way, and he came in second place in the Libertarian Party ticket and really gave Gary a run for his money. And I felt it was very much like the Ron Paul movement of 2012. We drew in a lot of disaffected voters from both the conservative and liberal ranks that were looking to smooth out their logic and try to get behind a principled candidate.
Yeah, Austin Peterson kind of surprised me because it seemed like he came out of nowhere, but he had a passionate following. Gary Johnson was seen as a strong possibility to win it, going in. I had actually, he had made an announcement in New York City at Liberty Fest. I had actually covered that last October, I believe. And I had a chance to talk to Gary Johnson, so I knew from way back when, then last year, that he was probably going to be a favorite. But a lot of people got behind the young, enthusiastic, kind of boombastic in his own way, Austin Peterson. And hopefully there's still a future for him somewhere else, down the road. Because, I'm listening to some of Gary Johnson's positions. And I don't know if you just listened to the interview I had with Jeff Miller. Immigration, I think, or the problem with illegal immigration is one of the biggest job killers and one of the biggest strains that we have on our economy. And my perception, if you listen to Gary Johnson, is he seems to be an open borders globalist in regards to immigration. Would you not agree with that?
I agree with you there.
Mm-hmm.
I think what separates Johnson's position, because I think Johnson, he's more of a left libertarian than a consistent libertarian, because there are a lot of libertarians that will see government borders, and drawing back to what I said before about how you own yourself, you own your property, therefore taxation is theft. So government by its very nature is evil. And so that's why a lot of libertarians will look at a government-crafted border and see it as illegitimate. But Gary Johnson, on the other hand, I feel that when he looks at this approach, he's coming from the liberal mindset that, we have an obligation to help all these people. And I think that's a very dangerous position for people to take, and I believe it's at odds with libertarianism, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it almost seems like they kind of planted a liberal in your... Because, a classical liberalism... I believe in libertarianism myself. Like, I'm known as conservative, but I'm actually very much a libertarian because I do believe in states' rights. I'm what a lot of people would refer to as a classical liberal in a lot of ways, which is really what a libertarian, in my opinion, is.
Right, and I believe it was Ronald Reagan who said that at the heart of every conservative is a libertarian.
Exactly, yeah, because, he was big in 1964 backing Barry Goldwater. He made that very important speech in the 1964 Republican National Convention, and that was in a lot of ways the birth of modern libertarianism there. But let me ask you a question, right? Rand Paul, right? Rand Paul, he's known as this, big flag waver for libertarianism and whatnot. Would you like to have seen him maybe run on your ticket?
I would take him any day of the week over Gary Johnson. I'm with you there, 100%.
Yeah, no, I've always been a big fan of Rand Paul, and I was kind of shocked. A lot of things this national election cycle for the Republican Party kind of threw me off. I didn't expect Scott Walker to fizzle out
that quickly.
Yeah, exactly. It seemed like he was in the race for like a few hours. Like I was just like, next thing you know, he had he was $1 million in debt. And his campaign was in debt, and he was out. Rand Paul never really registered very high in this race. Carly Fiorina did probably a little bit better than most people expected. And then you had a lot of people that stuck around too long. But I really was disappointed, to see Rand come and go so quickly. Now, looking down ticket, what's going on with the Libertarian Party? Are you guys have any, kind of dark horses that are running on some of these races that maybe have a shot to make an impact in D.C.?
I'm not too familiar with a lot of the down ticket candidates. There is one that I know from Florida. His name is Augustus Invictus, and he's actually trying to unseat Marco Rubio. So I don't know if he's going to get a lot of the conservative support there, but that's really the only down ticket guy that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I don't see Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio, I don't believe is even running an active campaign. He's out in 2017. See, that's one of the things that actually upset me the most with this, because everybody knows that I'm a Cruz supporter. I recently got a lot of heat for saying that I would support Donald Trump if he's the nominee, but I do feel that I would rather deal with the wild card than knowing that we're screwed with Hillary Clinton. Maybe I'm wrong for that, and a lot of people will call me into question for it, but that's my position. But Marco Rubio recently came out and said, I released, like he was decreeing like he was this king, I release my delegates to Donald Trump. Like, first of all, who is he to even do that? And he doesn't have authority to even do that. It was very symbolic. It was like an attempt, I think, for, I guess, self-preservation by Marco, to go ahead and declare those delegates for Donald Trump.
And I was actually listening to Laura Ingraham on the radio the other day, and she was talking about this very thing with Marco Rubio. And she made an interesting point. How earlier in the race, Marco Rubio started coming out hitting Trump hard and saying all these vicious things about him. But now in the past few weeks, he's taken a different approach, and he's siding with Trump. He's endorsing him, giving him his delegates. So Laura Ingraham was saying, all right, Marco, which side of your mouth was honest? You're lying to your supporters one way or another about Trump.
Yeah, and that's actually the story of Marco Rubio. If you look at him, and listen, I started out as a huge Marco Rubio fan. I mean, I go back 5 years ago, 6 years. I really, really liked Marco Rubio. He was the Tea Party darling. I saw him as a star. I thought he was a guy that could run and win the nomination for presidency up until about 2013.
Right, with the Gang of Eight bill.
With the Gang of Eight bill, because I watched that, I witnessed it in real time. You get so many fair weather Republicans or political people that when it's a major national race, that's when everybody jumps in and they're like, they know everything because they saw, they watch news for 15 minutes for the last couple of weeks and they have an idea of everything. I saw that play out. And honestly, the one word that I would use to accurately describe it is heartbreak. I really like Marco Rubio, and he broke my heart as a conservative with his position on the Gang of Eight bill. And that's when I knew that we could not really trust him and stuff. And watching him kind of fizzle out after that, I don't even feel bad for him. And I don't know what kind of political future he has. I mean, he did stand firm on some things, but the fact that he would go on Spanish language television and say something completely different to people that he shouldn't be trying to kowtow to people who aren't even citizens of this country, and then he's going to go out and then he's going to tell American citizens who he actually works for something completely different. So Marco Rubio has been a huge disappointment in my eyes. Obviously, but watching him and at times, watching him and Ted Cruz go after Trump, I was, kind of, it brought a smile to my face during, I believe it was the Florida debate in particular where they hammered him really hard. They kind of tag teamed them. Right. But look, a couple of months later, he completely forgets about the whole little Marco thing and the whole pro-amnesty thing that he was being called out for on Trump. And the funny thing too is because it's almost like who's more pro-amnesty, Trump or Rubio? It's hard to figure out. But they're both, to me, in my estimation, very fake. Yeah, so I mean, what do you think is Donald Trump? What do you think in practical application Donald Trump's comprehensive immigration reform is going to look like, Justin, in your opinion?
Honestly, I don't even know if he's going to get the wall built. Mm-hmm. When we look at government as an entity and just how inefficient it is, they're already supposed to have a wall, yet they don't. I mean, we've seen Trump talk out of both sides of his mouth when it comes to just about every single position that he's running on. Yeah. So it seems that he's just saying these things to get into power, and then who knows what the heck he's going to do if he's elected president. But I honestly don't think that if he's elected president, we will ever see a wall.
Yeah, it's almost like he's almost like the guy that's on the first date and he wants to impress you. So he's going to come up and he's going to make up all these wild things and make all these crazy promises, because he wants to get on your good side. But then probably once he gets on your good side, then he's never going to call. That's kind of my perception of Donald Trump.
I love that analogy because from what I've heard, I've never actually read his book, but apparently in his book, The Art of the Deal, he actually says that exact thing. He says that you need to make your first negotiation so wild that a few months later you can try to draw it back and your offer will seem so much more reasonable. So right now he's going to be saying, yeah, build the wall, make America great again. But if he gets elected, he may be saying, guys, the wall is expensive. We can't do this. I can't get Congress on board. So that's probably how it's going to play out.
You know what's funny, and just to go back a little bit in history, because everybody hammers Bush, and I'm not a Bushy or anything like that, but if you look at the deficit was close to being closed, even with the major surges of the war and everything. At around 2006, we were close to getting there to closing the deficit, and then. Bush, who was wildly unpopular, lost. At that point, both houses,
both the House and the Senate,
both the House and the Senate went to the Democrats, and the spending and the deficit blew up after that because the liberals wanted to spend. But what's funny? In 2006 was when they actually passed that legislation to start building the wall. So if you look at how much wasteful spending has occurred in the last 10 years. They could have built 3 walls.
Yeah.
And they could have tripled border security. They could have did all these things that the experts are saying will solve the immigration problem. But it's just, what it is? It boils down to the one thing. And listen, campaign promises, wild pieces of legislature, which may or may not work. None of it means anything. The one thing that we have to do is send people to Washington, D.C. that have... And honestly, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Balls. I mean, if you don't have political will, you're not going to get things done. And it's a shame. I mean, I don't know what your position was. My candidate, obviously, the whole time on the presidential race was Cruz. But we needed to send somebody like that, or
Right.
a Rand Paul, or a Scott Walker. Somebody, Scott Walker reeks of political will. I mean, if you see what he did and he accomplished in Wisconsin in the time that he's been in there.
I think that as debilitating as this upcoming election seems, I think that we also have reason to smile and have some hope, because these candidates that lost, the Cruzes, the Rand Pauls, even Rubio to some degree, now they still have the avenue to make change in other areas where they can be much more effective. Like, as much as I would have disagreed with a Cruz presidency, I think that he's one of the greatest senators that we have. So now we're still going to have him in Washington affecting change from Congress, as Rand Paul is doing right now. He's seeking re-election.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons I think he got out of the race early. And didn't they make a provision special for him? I think initially in the state of Kentucky, you couldn't run simultaneously for senator and president.
Right.
I think they changed that for him.
Right, you're correct about that.
Yeah, but you're right in a sense, because I think all these guys that actually know what they're talking about are going to be, I hope, on the Senate floor consistently bashing Trump if he doesn't do what he's promising to do, which is really that's what it's all about to me.
We also have to understand the separation of powers here. So if you keep good senators in office, such as Cruz or Rand Paul, it's not the president that has the authority to write law or create spending. It's the Congress that does that. Yeah. So it's going to be these good men that are going to have control over those things.
Well, you would think that. Because if you really look at the way that it runs, I mean, we've had the House of Representatives since 2010.
Yeah.
So we supposedly controlled the purse string since then, and it was supposedly the Tea Party that won it for us, and they were supposedly going to be conservative. But since then, we've seen massive wasteful spending bill after massive wasting spending bill. So I mean, the separation of powers. Yeah, legally we still have that. Right. But if you and again, this speaks to political will. If you don't have legislators that are willing to fight and assert that separation of powers, we're going to wind up basically with an imperial presidency. And listen, we've already got Obama, who set so much precedent, with the way that he's governed the last 7.5 years.
That is just going to get worse and worse.
Exactly. Yeah, if we put Hillary Clinton, and she's going to be an extension of what he's been doing. And God knows, for all we know, Donald Trump could be better, could make America great again. Who knows? Or he can be even worse.
Yeah, and that's why with Liberty Hangout too, I was speaking about this on Andrew's podcast a week ago. We were going over how when the United States was founded and our founders crafted the Constitution, they included 3 fail-safes because they knew that power corrupted and that this nation would need to hit a reset button. They first gave us the Second Amendment. Second Amendment gave us the right to bear arms, not to go hunting, but to defend ourselves from a tyrannical government.
Yeah, go hunting legislators.
The second fail-safe that they gave us was the Article 5 Convention to try to recraft the Constitution to fight back against big government. And then the third one that I feel that we need to have a bigger conversation about is the 10th Amendment, states' rights. Believe it or not, up until the 1860s, it was widely believed that the 10th Amendment gave the states the right to secede. And I believe that we're coming to a turning point in our history where I think it may be too futile to try to bite back at government through the federal process. Like we see, even as much as Rand Paul and Ted Cruz are doing, it's very little in comparison to how much the progressives are doing. So I think, and even an Article 5 convention, if we can attain that, well, guess what? Then we have enough support to get these good guys into office, but we clearly don't. So I think the big conversation that we need to be having is having a serious conversation about state secession. Because all it takes is one state to lead the way. We don't need the majority of the 50 states.
Yeah, and it's crazy. You know what would crumble the federal government? And I believe this and I think it's true, and you may or may not agree, but if Texas were ever to leave the union,
that's
Texas,
the state I hope leaves first.
Exactly, yeah, and there's been grumblings about that on and off. You hear it, every couple of years there's chatter about it, but Texas has actually created over 50% of the jobs since Obama's been president. I mean, they're the actual model, and that's actually the state that I want to go to eventually when my daughter goes to college.
Hey, same here.
Yeah, exactly, because it's like they don't have a state income tax. They're creating more jobs than the whole rest of the country combined. And they have I think at last check, they had something like a $15 billion surplus. So they're an example
they're totally independent.
Exactly, and they do it, and they don't do it by creating a massively huge government. They do it by giving more power to the citizens, less taxation, which empowers people, and they can take care of themselves. I mean, we really should be having, we should try to make our citizens, because we have liberty, because we have freedom under our Constitution, people should be self-sufficient and not so dependent on this big government.
Right, I'm with you there 100%. That's why our founders were so smart and ahead of their time to know that, believe it or not, fun fact of the day, there is actually no such country called the United States of America. The United States is simply supposed to be a federation of 50 already sovereign states. The states are supposed to be the nations, and our founding fathers knew that by having these separate states independently ruling themselves, it would be like a free market of ideas, and the best ideas would win. And so that's why we see states like Texas, they lead the way. They have the economic freedom. They have the personal freedom, and that's why they're totally independent, free of the federal government.
Yeah, that reminds me of Rick Perry with the laboratories of innovation, but it's really true. You go with what your state has, whether it's the natural resources, you get the government out of the way, you get the EPA out of the way, whether you've got coal, whether you've got oil, whatever it is you do, you make the best out of your situation to be as prosperous as you possibly can. And the biggest inhibitor to that is an overly intrusive federal government, which is what we're seeing.
Right. Mm-hmm. Couldn't agree more with you there.
Well, listen, Justin, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Why don't you give out your contact information? Where can people find you?
Sure. People can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Liberty Hangout. Follow on Twitter @Liberty Hangout. You can subscribe to our podcast. We're on iTunes with the Liberty Hangout podcast. And just check out our website, libertyhangout.org.
Fantastic. Justin, thank you so much for joining me. It was an enlightening conversation. I'm glad to see that the Libertarian Party is strong with a lot of good, strong young thinkers like yourself. I'd like to thank Jeff Miller for joining me. We also had Niger Innes with a great conversation earlier in the show. Every Thursday night at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Lanterns Radio Network. You can catch us, and we'll be back next week with another mega show. God bless, and thanks for listening.